My name's Adam Pierce, and I want to tell you about something that's haunted me for the past few months. I didn't think it would be that big of a deal when it first started, but now I can't shake this uneasy feeling that someone is still watching me. I wish I'd trusted my gut earlier. It all began this past spring. I was renting a small house in a quiet neighborhood just outside Chicago. The kind of place where nothing ever happens, you know? Families walking their dogs, kids playing outside, real peaceful. I'd moved there to get away from the city, and for the most part, it worked. I could leave my windows open at night and not feel paranoid. The house next door had been empty for months. It was owned by an older guy named Mr. Carlisle. But after his wife passed away, he moved into a nursing home. The house just sat there, untouched. I remember it being a little creepy, but it never bothered me. That is, until someone moved in. It was around mid-April when the new tenant showed up. His name was Joel, and he looked to be about my age, early 30s. Tall guy, quiet. I didn't really see him much at first. I figured he was just getting settled in. We all know how that goes when you're busy unpacking and whatnot. But after a few weeks, I started noticing things that didn't quite add up. The first time I saw him up close, it was a Sunday afternoon. I was mowing my lawn and I saw him standing in his backyard, just standing there, staring. Not at me exactly, but sort of in my direction. He wasn't doing anything, not gardening, not grilling, just standing. It struck me as odd, but I didn't think too much of it. I mean, people are weird, right? Who was I to judge? A few days later, I ran into him at the mailbox. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to introduce myself. I gave him a friendly, "Hey man, how's it going?" But he barely responded. He just muttered, "Good," without looking up. His eyes stayed fixed on the mail in his hands. That's when I noticed something strange. He wasn't holding any real mail. It was just junk flyers, but he was staring at them like they meant something important. I shrugged it off and didn't think much of it. But over the next couple of weeks, things got weirder. You know how you can feel when someone's watching you? It's this strange sense in the back of your mind that you can't explain, but you know it's happening. That's how I started feeling. Every time I was outside, whether I was watering my plants or taking out the trash, I could feel Joel's eyes on me. It wasn't like he was being friendly, either. There was something off about the way he'd watch me. Not directly, but from his window. Sometimes I'd catch him out of the corner of my eye, just standing there in the shadows, like he thought I couldn't see him. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to this weird sound, like a soft tapping on glass. My heart was racing, but I told myself it was probably just the wind or something outside. I tried to go back to sleep, but then I heard it again, tap, tap, tap. This time, it was coming from the kitchen. I got up, barely breathing, and crept down the hall. The tapping got louder as I got closer to the kitchen window, and that's when I saw it, Joel. He was standing outside on the other side of the glass, his hand pressed against the window. He was staring right into my house, just watching. I felt my stomach drop. I froze for what felt like an eternity, but eventually I yelled, "What the hell, man?" And he took off, disappearing into the darkness of his yard. I was so freaked out that I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. First thing the next morning, I called the police. They came out and talked to Joel, but he denied everything, said he hadn't been anywhere near my house, that I must have imagined it. The officer shrugged it off like it was nothing and left, and that was it. No arrest, no follow-up, nothing. After that night, things only got worse. I started finding little things moved around in my yard. My garden hose would be stretched out like someone had been using it, or my back gate would be unlatched even though I always locked it. I know it sounds paranoid, but I started feeling like I wasn't alone, even inside my own house. One Saturday evening, I was sitting in my living room watching TV when I heard it again. That same tapping sound. Only this time it was louder, more deliberate. I jumped up, adrenaline pumping through me, and ran to the window. There he was again, Joel, standing even closer than before, his hand slowly dragging across the glass. I lost it. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but before I could even say anything, Joel stepped back from the window and walked away. By the time the cops showed up, he was gone, and once again there was no evidence that he'd been there at all. They told me they'd do extra patrols around the neighborhood, but I knew that wouldn't help. Joel wasn't breaking any laws. He was just there, creeping into my life one unsettling moment at a time. At this point, I couldn't take it anymore. I started staying at a friend's place during the week, only coming home on the weekends to check on the house. Every time I walked in, I half expected to find Joel sitting in my living room waiting for me. Thankfully, that never happened. But what I did find on one of those weekends was worse. I walked into my bedroom, and on my nightstand there was a photo. It was an old Polaroid of me, taken through my living room window while I was sitting on the couch. I could feel the blood drain from my face. The picture was dated the night I'd heard the tapping on the window, the same night Joel had been outside. I immediately packed a bag and left. I couldn't stay there any longer. I didn't care about the house, the mortgage, none of it. I just wanted out. That was 3 months ago. I've since moved across town and I've tried to forget about Joel. But the truth is, I can't. Every time I hear a noise in the middle of the night, I think about him standing outside my window watching me. And every time I feel like someone's behind me, I can't help but wonder, what if he found me again? The scariest part? You never really know who your neighbors are. The people you see every day, the ones you wave to as you pull into your driveway, any one of them could be watching you, and you'd never even know it. You know, I always thought stuff like this happened to other people. It's the kind of thing you see in movies or hear about on the news, but you never think it could happen to you. My name's Lisa Turner. And for the last year of my life, I've been looking over my shoulder, waiting for the day when this all finally ends. It started a little over a year ago. I had just moved into this nice little apartment on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, but I loved it. It was on the 3rd floor of a small complex, one of those places where the neighbors smile but keep to themselves. Perfect, I thought. I didn't need anyone in my business. The first time I noticed something weird was probably around 2 weeks after I moved in. I'd come home from work. I'm a dental assistant, by the way, and I noticed something odd. There was this postcard on my doormat. No envelope, no stamp, just a postcard. It had a picture of a beach on it, like one of those cheap, generic ones you'd pick up in a gas station. On the back, all it said was, "Wish you were here." No signature, no explanation. I didn't think too much of it at the time. I figured it was meant for someone else, or maybe just some kind of odd mistake. I tossed it in the trash and didn't give it another thought. But looking back now, I realized that was when it started. That was the beginning. But then, the notes started showing up. They were small, handwritten, on little scraps of paper. They'd be slipped under my door, left on my windshield, or even tucked into my mailbox. At first, they were vague, just things like, "You're beautiful," or "I've been watching you." Creepy, right? But I kept telling myself it was probably some idiot messing with me. I even laughed it off with a friend over drinks one night, saying, "I've got my own personal stalker." But deep down, I wasn't laughing. Not really. Things escalated pretty quickly after that. One night I came home late from work. It had been a long day, just one of those days where you're exhausted and can't wait to crawl into bed. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and froze. Lying on my kitchen table, right in the middle of the table, was a single rose. A red rose. I didn't put it there. And I was sure, absolutely sure, I'd locked the door when I left that morning. But someone had been in my apartment. Someone had been inside while I was gone. I called the police. They came, took a report, and did a quick sweep of the apartment, but there was nothing they could really do. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing was stolen. The officer who came out tried to reassure me, but I could tell by the look on his face that he thought I was overreacting. "We'll keep an eye on it," he said. But I didn't feel any better. After that, I started noticing little things. But then, one night, I got home and checked the camera footage. And there he was. A man, standing just outside my door. He was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low over his face. He stood there for about 10 minutes, just standing. Not knocking, not trying to break in, just standing there as if he was waiting for something. My stomach dropped. I remember sitting there staring at the screen, my hands shaking. Who was this guy? What did he want? I showed the footage to the police, but again, they couldn't do much. They couldn't identify him from the footage, and without a crime being committed, there wasn't much they could do. "We'll keep an eye on it," they told me again. But I knew that wasn't enough. Then, one night, the breaking point came. I was staying with my friend Amy, who lived a few blocks away. We were sitting in her living room watching TV, trying to distract ourselves from the whole mess. I'd told her everything by this point, and she was doing her best to help me through it. At some point, I got up to use the bathroom. I left my phone on the coffee table. When I came back, Amy was holding it, her face pale. "Lisa," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you have a text." I took the phone from her and looked at the screen. The message was from an unknown number. It simply said, "You can't hide." That was the final straw. I went to the police again, but this time I demanded that they take it seriously. I gave them the phone, the notes, everything. They finally launched an investigation, and after weeks of digging, they found him. Turns out it was a guy who lived in the building across from mine. He'd been watching me for months, keeping track of my every move. The police found pictures of me on his computer, hundreds of them. He had notes, journals. He'd been following me, even breaking into my apartment when I wasn't there. He was arrested, of course. But even now, months later, I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched. I moved to a new apartment, a new city even, but that sense of paranoia never really goes away. Every time I hear a noise at night, or see someone standing just a little too close to me on the street, I wonder, is it happening again? The scariest part of all this? It wasn't the notes, or the breaking in, or even the pictures. It was the realization that someone can watch you for so long, without you even knowing. They can invade your life in ways you never thought possible. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's too late.